On you guys, welcome back to the SNHU online podcast. My name is Giovanni, and I am a sophomore at Southern New Hampshire University. I am majoring in information systems and with the focus in information security. So, cybersecurity, for those of you that are on the podcast and wondering what this is all about, I owe you data on what's going on with week 5 and 6. So, we always start with the grades. If this is your first time here, I am holding an A in this class, so why should you listen to me? I have been on the dean's list ever since I started school and have not missed it. And so, with that, in this particular class, I'm just sharing what it is like to experience this in a week by week basis. A large part of that because there's some people who want to know. So, I want to go through a couple of things I think that you should pay attention to in your week 5, specifically in your week 5, because there's going to be a number of things that can slip by you really quickly, and I want to make sure I point those out for you. So let's go ahead get into Module 5, and I will point out what I think you should focus on. First of all, in this discussion portion, make sure that you discuss what the brainstorming process you use to identify the bias in your primary and secondary sources. If you don't know what the primary and secondary sources are, please make sure you look back in weeks 2 and 3. Okay, he is expecting for you to go back to those documents, pull up what you use as your primary and your secondary sources, and then provide how you were going through your brainstorming process. Don't just make something up. He will go back and check. Trust me when I tell you that. People inside of my study group have encountered that where they wrote something different. He gave them an F and then told them to go back and to look at the primary and secondary sources that they provided. Okay. The next part that I think that you should pay attention to is what perspectives do you think are missing from the narrative about your historical event? Why that is important is because this gives you an opportunity to set into motion what you think is missing, because if you look right below that, when you get ready to respond to your peers, you're going to be pointing out to them a different angle or narrative that they did not address when they were putting their response out above you. So if you're looking at it from, hey, what did I not think about as a bias? What did I not think about as a narrative that I have going on? I'll give you an example of that. My situation is, my topic is Chernobyl, and I am specifically speaking about the political aspects of Chernobyl and how things were covered up. And in tying that together, one of the narratives that I looked at was the Chernobyl disaster was never really told from a child's perspective. So I kind of tied that in, and I'll tell you why a little bit later in another aspect. But that is the or three things I really think that you should focus kind of hard on when you're doing this. Your 5-2. Okay, in your 5-2, I think this is 5-2. Okay, in your 5-2, you want to make sure that in here you focus on, this is kind of a transition. So what he's doing is he's saying, tie in a historical roots of a situation that has to do with a current event. So what I did was at the time of this recording, Donald Trump is one of the only presidents that has ever gone through an indictment. And so with that being said, I kind of tied that into the political aspects of Chernobyl. All right. And so I was looking at the historical roots of it and kind of explaining that. The other two you'll be fine with if you just read through the question. However, propose how the narrative of your current event might change if it were told from a missing perspective. So what I did to tie that into a current event, rather than going the Donald Trump aspect, what I did was switch this over to a narrative of how, for example, when the pandemic started, the way that the government handled and was kind of keeping information hidden from the public was the same way that the people were keeping this disaster in Chernobyl and how it was affecting, the grounds and the people, and they were keeping all of that very hidden from others. So I kind of tied those together. So that would be an example of how you would propose how your particular narrative about the current event that you were talking about were told if you were to talk about it in a totally different way. So I just talked about, like, hey, what about kids telling their story about this, the whole pandemic issue and getting COVID for the very first time, if that story wasn't really being told. So that was one aspect that I think that you should really just keep an eye out for it. I think you'll be fine. You really will. You'll be fine in doing this. 6 is not really that much for you to worry about. 6, one of the pitfalls I think of 6 is when you get ready to, this is basically talking about you being historically informed as a citizen and why that's important and what responsibilities that you have with that. So here is one thing I think that might get overlooked. So I'll explain what I took from this and where I think this might be going. This right here was something about, like, far as communities, and as people were responding to this and I was reading my peers, they were talking about things, for example, like the one person was talking about, like, their area was flooding, like the roads where their house was constantly flooding. And another person was talking about how in their particular area there's this I guess you were to say, like, they were having, like, bad water in their area, and so the historical knowledge of that, how would it have been different if they were, if you were telling this from a different perspective? And so what I took from this was that this needed to be tied to your situation, and so I kind of tried to tie my particular issue as it related to something that was going on in Chernobyl, but others didn't do that. And so when you look in the response part where he's saying, what perspective did your peers offer that you did not consider? And most of them did not provide anything that I didn't consider. Most of them just answered a random question like, my road is flooding or it has potholes, which had nothing to do with a historical event that they were studying, because I had no idea to see how they pieced those two together. So that's the only thing I think that you really might want to hear, is just focus on not just answering the question, but trying to tie it back to your particular topic, whatever that is, so that the person can actually respond to how things are different. Other than that, there wasn't really much that I think that you're going to really need to do outside of this. So all you do, go through. 6 will be an easy thing. You're going to get prepared for 7. So for those of you that are looking at what will be in 7, 7 is a detailed response. You do get a document that you can fill out. This is optional to give you like a Word template. Do understand something, that you've been doing all of this the whole entire time, which is normally the way that this class is. But don't sweat this. You got this. If there's any questions, something inside of here that has struck your fancy and you have some questions for me, just leave them down below, okay? Anybody who has been following me for any length of time through this process knows I'm very quick to answer your questions. If I don't know, I'll get you in front of the right people or tell you how to contact the right people. And if this is something that has been beneficial to you, just please hit the like button. It does let the algorithm know that this is useful to other students, and I'll see you guys next week.